Welcome to another CEO Wisdom Pod with Renee Frye with us today. Heal ourselves, heal the world is her mantra, and she's a trauma healing holistic specialist and owner at Sacred Soul Healing Institute. So we're going to talk about mindfulness, coaching, abuse recovery today, and indigenous healing, which I am a firm believer in. This podcast brought to you by podpire.com. If you want to start, scale, be invited to podcasts like this one. Podpire is my podcasting company. A bunch of people use podcasts to learn, to meet new people, and to generate clients and leads. We can help you get invited to podcasts. We can get sponsors for your pod, start or scale a podcast. Hit me up. These are unconventional monetization methods for podcasting. Podpire.com. Renee, welcome to the pod. Can you tell me a bit more about yourself and your company?
Hello, thank you for having us. Our company, Sacred Soul Healing Institute, is a peer-run organization that provides trauma-responsive mental wellness and recovery support services and programs. We provide holistic healing, life wellness coaching, mindfulness modalities, teaching people how to be mindful in each moment of the day, rather than it sounding like a good theory that's real hard to wrap our head around. And also indigenous healing. So we do a lot of trauma healing work, and we come at that from every angle instead of just only coming from the physical or the mental or the spiritual. We come at it through all the angles so we can find that balanced wellness.
Recovery and addiction. Tell us about your story with addiction and your recovery.
I started abusing substances at a very young age. In our language, we say, in the recovery world, we say DOC, which is drug of choice, also Department of Corrections. But so my DOC was meth and alcohol, both of them. And I started at a very young age. We had a lot of trauma growing up, and we did not have any skills or tools in how to mitigate that trauma. So eventually I became that trauma. I didn't know that I wasn't my trauma. And so that was devastating to me. And the people I was around didn't know. It's a lot of things happened in a lot of negative ways. But what I have learned is everybody's acting in their trauma. So happy people are doing happy things. Happy people are not harming other people. So everything I was around was trauma, not just me, but my entire environment was trauma. And so that became the norm for me. That was usual for me. So whatever we're most familiar with, we will come back to easier. So I began to seek out, unbeknownst to myself, but I began to naturally seek out chaos and trauma because that's what I was used to. So if the chaos and trauma wasn't there, I would go find it. And it's not hard to find when you're using meth and alcohol. So, it just kind of comes with the territory.
Right. So how did you heal?
I worked for most of my life, even amongst my drug abuse, and basically always sort of got by. There was periods of times where I was homeless and things were really, really bad. Throughout that time frame, I met and married my husband. We were in our addiction together. And one day he just came home and said he was done using meth. And I said, excuse you? What? We talked about it for a long time. And his main thing was, we are always chasing this high we're never going to get. Chasing that first high. The first high is gone. And it just becomes a very destructive way of life. So we quit. We just quit. And then 3 years later, I quit drinking because he left. My daughter had left prior to that because of my behavior and my abuse. And then I decided, well, if the most two important people in my life have left me, then there could be a problem. So put the alcohol down, and then I was sober. But I just went through my day, putting a smile on my face, worked a lot of hours so I didn't have to think about things, and I was still uncomfortable in my own skin. So I was clean and sober for 8 years. And then there was an event that happened with people in my life that I'm close to, and it didn't make any sense. They blamed me for doing something I didn't do. And it's fine, but it was just so weird. It just didn't make any sense. The coincidences of events that happened, I just couldn't, it was enough to really make me stop and look at it and just go, I don't understand what's going on. Why do these people treat me the way they treat me? And so that was enough for me to I wanted to figure this out. So I stepped away from everything and everybody except for just, working and trying to understand how I could start healing, how people could treat me in unkind ways, even when I wasn't using. I just couldn't figure it all out. And so that led me to where I am now, 8 years later. So 16 years we've been clean and sober, walking in the recovery way. And it's been a beautiful journey. Not easy, but beautiful journey. And for the last 8 years, been on this intensive healing journey, deconstructing trauma, trying to understand, where does our trauma come from? Why do people treat us the way they treat us? Why do we act the way we act? And how can we come to a balanced space?
The meth addiction and alcohol, where did it begin? Because not everyone gets introduced to meth. Like me, grew up south of Montreal. I went pretty deep into alcohol as the good Irish that I am, and we did a bunch of drugs, but I think it stopped really at cocaine. Meth was like, oh shit, I don't want to be a meth head or a crackhead. So it stopped there. Our perception of bad was there, and probably heroin. I think I met a couple of friends that tried it, but they were a bit extreme. That was the dark zone. So how did you reach that zone?
Early in high school. The people I was running with, it started with Coke, but then that wasn't enough. So it quickly shifted to meth, and it was just the circle I was in, and it was available. And then once it's available, you will always find it if you want it. It's
It was just like that. You probably didn't have the mental barriers to it, or people telling you that meth is a bit too much and it is this plague. So I guess it kind of organically found you. Was that because of your upbringing, your traumas that you carried at this time, or were you just seeking chaos very early in that phase of life that is chaotic?
Both, all of the above. Yeah, the traumas that we had growing up definitely were too much for us to deal with. And they even the adults still don't have a real good balance on exactly what happens. So I've learned that people, when they're in traumatic situations, will create their own reality. And so some of the reality that was created for us during our traumatic experiences was like a fantasy, that it wasn't that bad, that it was, okay, and that we're, just on this vacation when we're not. And, so there, a lot of it has to do with a shift of reality and perception for us that were traumatized through it and what we went through compared to the adults in that environment. They saw things in an entirely different way than we did. And so there was no recourse for us. There was no way to work through that. We were at an impasse. And so at that point, we're just trying not to feel, just trying to get away from that pain. And that's where the drugs came into play. In the chaos, we just grew up in chaos. So it was kind of like something we always knew, and it became real familiar for us. So the drugs just fit right into that scene.
And is it a necessary phase of life? Because just as you got like quite deep in meth, me was like one blackout per weekend for 3 years. So it's like if we need as young brains to experience it and there's the pervasive thing here is that we're not taught that if you chase pain, you get easiness, and if you chase easiness, you get pain. Nowadays, my drug of choice, other than caffeine, it's sports, making good physical activity, and I think I'm a really happy person as a result of that. I impose pain on myself, and then everything after that it becomes easy. At the early phase of my life, I mean, I did have sports, but I did not have the wisdom that they could lead me to a scalable life. I think scale is the key word here, because yeah, if I was just chasing the night, like there's only today, there's only now, and I don't care about tomorrow, and there it go. I woke up the next day at 2 p.m. with the worst headache known to mankind, not remembering the last 3 or 4 or 5 hours of my last night, and the feeling of shame, oh, what have I done again? Because I had this quite intense personality when I would get very drunk, and I knew that I would have done at least one thing that was incredibly dumb. And that cycle I never really got out of, and it almost wrecked my life, So the question is, do you feel it's a rite of passage for everyone to experience drugs? And second, do you feel that if you chase pain, you get easiness of your life, and if you chase easiness, you get pain?
The rite of passage, it's a hard call, because so we believe that everything has a spirit, so alcohol has a spirit, meth has a spirit, we smudge, sage has a spirit, everything has a spirit. So I believe that we end up where we need to be, amongst, even in spite of the pain. But I think like wherever you ended up is where you needed to be. I needed to go through exactly what I went through. I wouldn't change one thing, and that's saying a lot, just because it's part of who I am. I definitely don't want to go back to a lot of it. But I don't want to repeat, but I know that I had to go through everything I had to. And alcohol is dangerous. Alcohol is the most dangerous drug I think there is, honestly, because it's accepted. People, if you are a meth head, if you have an addiction, if you have any kind of substance abuse addiction, people want to help you. They're like, oh my gosh, yes, let's help you. Someone that's an alcoholic, there's so much shame, like you said, there's so much shame and guilt around that. We hide it and we shove it down, and we pretend we don't have a problem. We can't have a problem because there's all those other people out there that can drink that don't have a problem. So in my head, alcohol is one of the most dangerous drugs out there, because everybody's trying to pretend that it's okay, and they're ashamed when they get in too deep with it. So it's real tricky. Could you repeat the question about the ease?
Yeah, the first one was rite of passage, and the second one is my theory of scale to life. And just to add a bit more meat around the bone, it's more than just doing sports, right? It's constant self-improvement. It's growing 1% on a daily basis, but it's inviting pain and dancing with it throughout my life. These businesses of mine, they're challenging. For example, right now I let go of all my employees, and right now I've got this demon torturing me, telling me that I wasted 5 years of my life employing people instead of just looking at the cold hard truth, which is that software can do a better job than humans. And it's fucking with me right now. But I'm like, yeah, I'm inviting the pain. I'll do a couple of rituals pretty soon to have that out of me and be light again, and start from scratch in a theory of everything, which I thought wasn't the one that I thought before. So I have a nice relationship with pain. My wedding's coming, got all this stress, and I invite it, and I dance with it, and I know that it's part of life. What an addict would do, what my former self would do, is completely self-sabotage myself, go out and drink and chase fun, chase that pleasure, chase that thrill. And I think that's not scalable. So my theory is, invite pain in your life, you get easy. And when you chase easy, chase going to that bar and drinking these shots, you get hard, you get the headache the next day, you get the wife dumping you, and everything that comes with it.
Yes, I understand. Yeah, definitely. 100% agree with that. And life is challenging, and that's the pain that you're talking about. And when we try to veer away from that challenge, we're not able to grow. We're just delaying the inevitable. So we actually increase that pain in the long run. And it becomes way more devastating than if we were just to look at it in the first place. And like you say, invite it. This is the challenge. And when that voice goes in your head and starts torturing you, that's where we use mindfulness, and that's where we find balance. Without that experience, you wouldn't know what you know now. So it served a purpose. Those 5 years served a purpose for you. You learned a lot. And now you're setting yourself up in a different way because you see the challenge and you're moving towards the ease rather than staying in the ease with the employees and trying to fight and fight and fight, and it end up worse off.
Another mindset that I think is essential for addicts is that, one, yes, understand that life is hard, and two, I think they just constantly self-disappoint themselves. And I see this behavior in one friend of mine, and they're like, yeah, I tried, it didn't work. But there's a secret to life, which is that you need to try 100 times and you might succeed once, And once you succeed once, well, you've got the formula. All you need to do is reproduce. But I think a bunch of addicts, they just go through life. They go through constant pain. So first, they don't have a good relationship with pain. They constantly cower down to easiness, but also they give up because they tried some things. They tried going to therapy. They tried this, they tried that, but they're in constant pain, and they never find a solution. And they think that everything in life comes easy, which is why we'll see a lot of rich kids, that parents are wealthy and had everything easy in life. They think that, oh, everything's easy in life. You find a solution instantly to that. But yeah, it's not the way that is. That's another mindset and framework that I thought that actually saves me. It's like the experimental mindset. We're gonna try 100 things before we even give up. And most of us give up after twice. So it's like, and most of us at best we will try 36 things over the course of 10 years, but you need to try 100 to have one course of success. What do you think about that?
I agree, definitely, because people, there's an idea in society that if, you try something and it doesn't work, that you're a failure. And that's not even it at all. We're here to learn. We're human beings. If we were perfect, we wouldn't need to be here. The whole purpose of being here is to learn. So we try something, and if it doesn't work out, then okay, we certainly could have learned something. We take whatever we learned from it and then apply it to the next thing we try, rather than giving up. And yeah, in addiction, the whole entire world is stuck in some sort of trauma, but especially in addiction, it's the drugs and alcohol are not the issue. And if we're trying to just treat that, it's never going to work. We have to get underneath that. And that's what our guidebook does, is to deconstruct that trauma. So when we feel like we're not enough, going back to when that very first happened, when we were children, remembering, doing some inner child work and going back to those spaces, going back to those memories and those experiences where someone had told us we weren't enough, and where we really felt that in our heart and where we accepted it. Once we begin to accept that we're not enough, it changes everything. And then there's no skin left in the game. There's no point in trying. If we're not enough, then why would we try? So coming back to some of that reprogramming, and like you said, when you repeat something over and over and over, it becomes a habit. So we've gotten into the habit of not being enough. We've gotten into the habit of giving up. We've gotten into the habit of using a substance to make ourselves feel better, rather than sitting with it and understanding and, identifying, this is what's going on. This is why I feel bad. I'm going to work through that in a little bit. I need to go do this other thing, but we can come back to this later and really start to unwind, unravel, deconstruct those layers of trauma, to get at the very core of what's going on, and then reprogram that with positive behavior, and then continue to repeat that positive behavior. And that becomes our new habit in our new way.
Right. I want to talk about different types of addiction. One that I see that is certainly prevalent and that I was inflicted with as a young guy growing up in south of Montreal, which is the HQ of MindGeek, aka Pornhub, is porn. I see a lot of kids using this mindlessly, and to me, it's the perfect nest for a further addiction: alcohol, then drugs, and yeah, just then an addiction to self-loathing and eventually suicide. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm being a bit extreme here, but it can be a very nice gateway because it's the same neuron pathways that fire in these cases. Do you get these folks that have this kind of addiction, and any opinion on the porn industry and what it's doing to or modern human brains?
Yeah, it's definitely all interwoven and everything's out of balance. So when people do not feel like they are wanted or they are valuable, it's going to act out in all kinds of different ways. And so pornography is one of those ways. When someone's addicted, there's sex addictions, and when people are addicted to that, this is going to sound crazy, but it goes back to not being enough. All of it goes back to not being enough. So when we feel like we're not enough, we can't get fulfilled, we can't be happy inside. And it's not that we can't be happy inside because we can't have a meaningful experience, whether it's a personal experience, a relationship, sexual, any of the experiences, mental health, spiritual. We can have positive experiences in any of those realms. But when we are not enough, we can't have a positive experience in any of the realms. And they're all very closely interwoven. And when we become really, when it really lands and hits home that we're not enough in all these areas, and we really feel that, then there's no hope. And when there's no hope, that's where that leads into suicidal tendencies. And it's really an awful place to be, to just not want to be here anymore, and to feel like there's nothing left and no hope.
I think porn is number one in worldwide addiction, because it's free and people don't talk about it. Obviously, it's really taboo to talk about masturbating all the time on porn. So I won't be fighting against it, but I'll certainly be educating people on that, because yeah, like once you do it, and young folks, they start at like 13. So what does that do to a young brain? You grow literally with those pathways, so they go very deep, right? They almost become part of your identity.
Yes.
And that's really perturbing, and I would love to see more studies on that. Now I'd love to talk about just one last addiction, which I think obviously is really, actually that one might even play par with porn right there. It's food, right? Obesity in America. I think there's a reason for that. And if people don't want to call it an addiction, I'm going to call it an addiction. When we see those 400-pound whales, going to McDonald's, well, I think they're eating their emotions out. The food makes them feel very good. And it does to me too, by the way. Like, food makes us feel good. And historically, we used to eat food as a social way to make links in a community. And that's cool. But there, you can very much overdo it, right? And not sure if you've seen the movie The Whale, but that movie had me cry, because it's really deep what this man is going through, and the pain. He lost his partner and so forth. I really recommend that movie to the audience. But anything to say on food addictions and how it's shaping the society in a very round format nowadays?
Absolutely. And it rolls back into this entire conversation. So when someone has a food addiction, I struggled my entire life with bulimia, because I was in a very unhealthy situation growing up. I was forced to eat, and I was small and my belly couldn't hold it. So I would just go to the bathroom and throw up, and it would make me feel better. And then I started to use that, and that's from young, like age 9. So maybe younger. So then that just became, like you say, that it becomes a habit in the brain. So those neural pathways in our brain begin to form that, and that becomes normal and natural. So yeah, and then I got older and I was like, oh, I can eat a pizza and not gain weight. And, so yeah, it was bad. And I battled with it my whole life. These last 8 years have been the best of my life as far as, on this healing journey, but it all comes down to the same thing. We don't feel like we're enough. So I will binge eat and then I will purge. And the reason I do that is because of stress. So it's a 100% an emotional piece there where we feel like this food is giving us. So there's multiple, it can break down into multiple ways. So especially for the mouth, because the mouth and that energy center or chakra is where we speak and where we're heard. So if I'm speaking and none of this is valid, nobody can hear me that's around me that I think is important in my life, I don't feel validated. So it's a strange way, but eating then helps me because it's in that oral fixation range. And so I'm not being heard when I speak. So I go eat a bunch of food and then that makes me feel better. So for the person that's binging, that's what's going on. Then you add another layer for the person that's purging and they're going to binge, then purge. And it's literally a way of comforting yourself when the world around you is uncomfortable.
Now, how do you heal all of that? I'm on Sacred Soul Healing's website and I'm seeing your programs, your prices here. How does one heal that? Let's say I'm the typical customer at Sacred Soul. I'm guessing you get probably around 5 people a week in the center, something like that. You're muted, Renee, or I can't hear you. I don't know why.
Oh, is
Yeah,
that
now I can hear you.
Okay. We generally work with five 90-minute appointments a day. And then we also work in other centers where we do groups. So there's days where we'll reach 60 people. So that's pretty cool. The longer sessions are 90 minutes and they're individualized. And so that's when it's more 5 to 6 people a day there. But it's a process. We work with people in a 6-month to up to a 2-year program, depending, and there's never a time where if people need to come in for maintenance and just wellness checks that we don't ever turn anyone away, even if they've come through that 6-month or 1-year or 2-year program. So the book, we have put that Deconstructing Trauma guidebook out into the world because it's accessible to everybody. And it takes a while to unwind those layers and to really understand, where did this first start in childhood? Everything goes back to childhood trauma for us, everybody. So we go back to those pieces, when did you first feel like food helped you, feel better? And we would go back to that space and recreate a positive experience when someone was 6 instead of the negative experience that was there. So it doesn't mean we ignore the experience, but it's all up to our perception and interpretation. So we can go recreate something that is healthy and help that little child heal, even though that's in the past. So it's kind of a beautiful, beautiful experience.
Wow.
To know that we're not stuck, because I'm not stuck, nobody's stuck.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, right? When you think of the science in that, because you come back in your memories, so you can see the pathways in your brain, getting there. Mm-hmm. And then you're trying to reconstruct these pathways with new ones. It's like a road that has not been traveled much before. You re-travel to it and it's probably painful, but then you divert that road in a new one, so that a new pathway is created. And now every time they think about that, they might have different behaviors. That's what you might see. And obviously there's a bunch of neurochemicals involved in there, whether that's endorphin, serotonin, and so forth. So quite fascinating. Exactly. Renee, where can we find out more about you?
Our company is Sacred Soul Healing Institute, and it's www.sacredsoulhealing.com, and soul is spelled SOL.
Like sol in español. Yeah, thank you so much for showing up today, Renee. That was Charles Cormier, host, and Renee Frye. You can find us at ceowisdompodcast.com.